In October 2025, a letter from Ethiopia landed at the United Nations, shattering diplomatic calm. It was a direct warning. Eritrea, Ethiopia's neighbor and former ally, was preparing for war. The language was sharper than ever before, making the world take notice. Ethiopia accused Eritrea of sabotaging a fragile peace, turning private anxieties into a public crisis. The Horn of Africa, already unstable, now faced the real threat of renewed conflict. Ethiopia, landlocked and restless, sees its lack of sea access as a national wound. Eritrea, with its Red Sea coastline, guards its sovereignty fiercely. Once allies in war, the two nations are now locked in bitter rivalry. The letter to the UN is a dramatic escalation, exposing deep-seated animosity and raising the stakes for the entire region. Ethiopia's internal struggles and Eritrea's exclusion from peace talks have only fueled suspicion. The world is now forced to confront a chilling possibility. The drums of war are beating once again in the Horn of Africa. The fragile peace is hanging by a thread. Ethiopia's letter was a direct indictment, accusing Eritrea of actively destabilizing Ethiopia from within. The most explosive claim: Eritrea is now colluding with a hardline TPLF faction, its former enemy. Addis Ababa alleges Eritrea is funding and directing armed groups in the rebellious Amhara region, framing Eritrea as the hidden hand behind Ethiopia's internal crises. The letter paints Eritrea as a spoiler, determined to undermine the Pretoria Agreement that ended the Tigray War. Ethiopia sees these actions as a coordinated strategy to keep it weak and divided, preventing it from pursuing its ambition for Red Sea access. The accusations are not just about security, they're about existential threats and national survival. For Ethiopia, Eritrea is no longer just a rival, but a direct threat to its stability. The stakes have never been higher. Eritrea's response was swift and absolute. The accusations are fiction, a pretext for Ethiopian aggression. Asmara insists its military posture is defensive, accusing Ethiopia of manufacturing a crisis to distract from domestic turmoil. Eritrea dismisses claims of collusion with the TPLF and Amhara militias, calling them fabrications. The real motive, Eritrea argues, is Ethiopia's push for sea access, seen as a threat to Eritrean sovereignty. The UN letter, in Eritrea's eyes, is diplomatic intimidation before a possible invasion. Both sides now claim to be the aggrieved party, deepening the deadlock. The international community is left to decipher the truth amid a war of narratives. The Red Sea is a global artery, vital for trade and energy. For Ethiopia, being landlocked is a strategic and economic straitjacket. Over 120 million Ethiopians depend on costly, vulnerable trade routes through Djibouti. Ethiopia's leaders see access to the sea as an existential necessity. Eritrea, having fought hard for its independence and coastline, sees any Ethiopian move toward its ports as a direct threat. The port of Assab, near the border, is especially sensitive. This is a zero-sum game. Ethiopia's need for access clashes with Eritrea's need for security. Every disagreement risks becoming a crisis. The Red Sea is both the prize and the trigger, potential wealth, but also a catalyst for war. Geography has turned a political dispute into a dangerous standoff. The world watches, knowing the stakes are global. Ethiopia's official stance is a balancing act, warning of war, but calling for negotiation. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed insists Ethiopia seeks sea access through peaceful means, proposing economic integration and port leasing. Yet Ethiopia warns its patience is not infinite, signaling that military options remain on the table. This strategy pressures Eritrea to negotiate, but also raises fears of imminent conflict. In Asmara, every Ethiopian statement about sea access is seen as a threat, hardening resistance. Deep mistrust makes genuine negotiation nearly impossible. The language of peace paradoxically heightens the sense of impending war. A single miscalculation could trigger escalation. The line between diplomacy and conflict is razor-thin. Both nations walk a dangerous tightrope, with the region's fate in the balance. The Ethiopia-Eritrea standoff is a global concern, unfolding in a region critical to world trade and security. Gulf powers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE have deep investments in the Red Sea corridor and are quietly urging restraint. The dispute also intersects with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, drawing in Egypt, which fears for its water security. Ethiopia suspects Egypt and Eritrea may be aligning to counter its influence. The risk: a local conflict could become a regional proxy war. The US, Europe, and China all have strategic interests: counter-terrorism, trade, and infrastructure. A war would threaten global shipping, investments, and regional stability. External actors may be forced to intervene to prevent chaos. The Horn of Africa's fate is now a matter of international urgency. The world cannot afford to look away. The Horn of Africa stands at a crossroads. The worst-case scenario: full-scale war with catastrophic humanitarian consequences and regional destabilization. Diplomacy offers hope. International pressure could force both sides to negotiate, perhaps securing Ethiopia port access while guaranteeing Eritrean sovereignty. But trust is scarce, and the risk of a frozen conflict, marked by proxy wars and perpetual instability, remains high. The choices made in Addis Ababa and Asmara, and the influence of global powers, will shape the region's future. This is about more than borders or ports. It's about the future of the Horn of Africa. Will the region find a path to peace and prosperity, or spiral into endless conflict? The letter to the UN has drawn a line in the sand. The world waits to see if these nations will step back from the brink.